Good morning, and thank you for joining us at this meeting of the New York State Assembly Task Force on Women's Issues. I want to lead off this morning with a trivia question. So what do the singer and songwriter Carole King, actress Edie Falco, Assemblywoman Deborah Glick, and Attorney General Letitia James, Labor leader Randy Weingarten all have in common? The answer is they are all alumni of public higher education in New York State, of either our two great systems, CUNY and SUNY. They are just a few of the millions of women and men whose careers are shaped by the educational experiences they received by attending a SUNY or a CUNY college. Today, over 56% of all students at CUNY and SUNY are women. They represent the future leaders of our state in all the many academic fields of study they are pursuing, and we are all responsible for helping to ensure that these great and large university systems are enabled to be responsive to their needs, their aspirations, and their dreams. So we've invited two very special guests, national leaders in higher education, who are guiding students to realize and obtain their dreams through educational opportunity and advancement. Women also face the motherhood challenges and perform invisible labor tending to children in the household, and that we know that women, nearly 2/3 of the women, have outstanding student debt in the United States. And because of this gender pay gap, women have a harder time repaying their loans. Affordable, higher quality education is key to closing the gap. I want to commend Chancellors Jim Malatras and Felix Matos Rodriguez for supporting frontline licensed nurses and nursing candidates by granting them priority access to CUNY and SUNY institutions to continue their life-saving work. Both CUNY and SUNY deserve a new deal that invests in faculty, student support, and improved facilities, and the kind of investment that our great higher education committee chair, Deborah Glick, consistently and eloquently advocated as key to the state's economic recovery. So first, we're going to hear from our Assembly Higher Education Chair, Deborah Glick, and then followed by CUNY's Chancellor, SUNY's Chancellor, and then the format will consist of Q&A. Speaker Hasty was set to join us this morning, but had to cancel at the last minute. We will be joined later in the morning by the first woman majority leader, Crystal Peoples-Stokes, and the first woman appointed chair of Ways and Means by the Speaker, Helene Weinstein. So Deborah Glick was appointed as the, I don't know, Deborah, were you the first woman to be appointed to chair the Higher Ed Committee? Or was there another woman before you? You're on mute.
Yeah, they had to unmute me. Not in the time that I was, not in the 31 years that I've been there, so.
And you were appointed chair of higher education in 2007.
Correct.
And you were first elected in
1990.
as the first lesbian and openly gay person to the New York State Legislature. So welcome to our Assembly Higher Ed Chair, Deborah Glick.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. This is a wonderful program. Great to have both of our chancellors with us today. There's no question but that the social mobility for generations of New Yorkers have gone through the campuses of both systems. And certainly in my family, my sisters and their husbands went to, we all went to Queens College. And my kid sister's children went to SUNY Albany and SUNY Binghamton. So higher ed has been the engine for social mobility, but also for keeping people in New York. The overwhelming majority of New Yorkers who attend our public higher education institutions remain in New York, build their careers and their professions and their lives here in New York. And it is not just important sort of in a global way, it's really important for those families. And we have every successive generation of immigrants that move through these systems, their children get to see someone who has modeled behavior, that college is the pathway for success. And so that's why we've continually supported increasing access through childcare centers at our colleges, because we know we have more and more single parents, both men and women, and they need to have the ability to see that their kids are in a safe space while they're getting their education, but their kids are on campus and their kids get to see that that is an exciting, vibrant community and something that they too want to aspire to. So I won't take up any more time. There is no better investment in New York, no better way to ensure that we have a full and robust recovery than to see a dramatic increase in our investment in both SUNY and CUNY. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Glick. And our next speaker is going to be CUNY's Chancellor, Dr. Felo V. Matos Rodriguez, became the 8th Chancellor of the City University of New York, CUNY, in May of 2019, making him the first educator of color and the first Latino to lead the nation's largest urban university. CUNY's sprawling system comprises of 25 campuses with an enrollment of over 275,000 degree-seeking students, over 225,000 adult and continuing education students, and an operating budget of over $3.6 billion. Chancellor Matos Rodriguez's distinguished career spans both academia and the public sector. He is a scholar, teacher, administrator, and former cabinet secretary for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. He has used his extensive regional and national networks and board memberships to advance the visibility and recognition of CUNY. He has extensive publication records in the fields of women's rights, Puerto Rican, Caribbean, and Latino studies, and migration. In keeping with his ambition to grow access for traditionally underrepresented firms to CUNY, he is working to bolster business opportunities for firms owned by women, minorities, and service-disabled veterans. Responding to the crisis of the coronavirus pandemic in March 2020, he oversaw within a week the transition of nearly all of CUNY's 50,000 course sections to distance education. In April of 2020, the university announced the Chancellor's Emergency Relief Fund to provide urgent support to students facing financial hardship among the pandemic. Launched with a $3.25 million in initial donations, the fund has provided grants of $500 each to thousands of CUNY students, including undocumented students who were excluded from financial relief by the federal government. Congratulations on earlier this week, Chancellor, naming the first woman president in the history of Medgar Evers College. We welcome you, Chancellor Matos Rodriguez, and a quick shout out to the women behind you, Deputy Vice Chancellor Glenda Grace and Maureen Shields and Mary Kay Kellogg. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for that overly generous introduction, Chair Seawright, and it's great to be here with so many supporters of the City University of New York and of SUNY. A special shout out to all the members here who are alums, including our great chair of higher ed, Assemblywoman Glick, and who's a dear friend and a graduate from Queens College. So I'm delighted to be here. And a shout out to the women in front of me that allow this work to be done, Glenda Grace, Maureen Shields, and Mary Kay Kellogg. So I am delighted to be here and to be joining my fellow traveler in the Chancellor world, Chancellor Malatras. Two brief things that I'll say before my, sort of more CUNY specific remarks. I feel like this is a trip to the past. The Chair Seawright mentioned that my field of work is women's history, in the history of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. So for many years, I was the sole guy in the Women's Studies Department meetings, the sole guy in the Women's Studies panel, the sole guy in the Women's Studies conference. So I feel very, very comfortable in this setting. And actually, in twist to a former life, the last book that I worked when I came to Hunter as a historian, as a faculty member to the CUNY system. It's a translation of the first feminist work in Puerto Rico by feminist labor leader Luisa Capetillo. And I wanted the book to be available to be for classroom use. And we did a translation several years ago, and Penguin Books is picking it up for classroom use. So my work this weekend is to go over the galleys and remember my life as a scholar. But anyway, delighted to be here today, and again celebrating Women's History Month. Sort of pertinent to be meeting with this great group. I, as many of you know, and Chair Seawright mentioned the historic appointment of Dr. Patricia Ramsey as the first woman president of Medgar Evers College, a biologist. So I think also an incredible role model for all our students, but particularly for women in the areas of science and STEM. And I'm very proud that 13 of my presidents in the system are women, and that I've been very proud to appoint other historic women appointments, like the first Dominican American president, President Daisy Coco de Filipis, over at Ostos Community College. So delighted, and about half of my cabinet, they appointed 7 women to be at the senior most level at the Chancellery in the City University of New York, and consistent with my vision that we have to have the kind of leadership that we need. We need to have leaders that reflect the students that we serve and the communities that we serve. And I've been very, very fortunate to build a team in a year and a half that resembles that and has the highest levels of commitment and quality that are included. So very, very proud of that record. You know, we are getting ready to transition to what we hope to be sort of the waning parts of the pandemic. Chair Seawright mentioned some of the things that we did in responding to the current situation as we get ready for the fall. You know, one of the themes that you're going to hear me talk about is the opportunity of moving from perpetuation to innovation, right? Clearly, there's many things about things pre-COVID that we miss, but we have learned to do a couple of things better. And one of the biggest responsibilities that I have is to make sure those lessons learned carry forward always on the best interest of our students and the communities that we serve, right? So I don't want to fall into a mindset that you begin to hear out there about the moment that things stabilizes, we're all going to go back to things as they were. There were many things as they were that needed change, that needed innovation. Some of those things we're able to do in the way that we support our students. Think about, for example, the incredible gains we've had in using virtual platforms to expand the way that provide mental health services to our students. Is an area where we had incredible need prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has just exacerbated that. And the many things that before the pandemic, our student health teams thought, well, you know, this is not going to really work, and doing more things using telehealth and using technology might not work. We have learned that they do work, right? And that they need to be part of a menu that provides a maximum level of opportunities for our students, right? So that we can connect with them where their need is. So for example, on that area of mental health, some of the money that from the CARES Act we used to invest in additional training and credentialing for our teams so that they could do more things virtually during the pandemic. And then hopefully when we go back to a better mix of in-face and virtual, so that we can, again, be nimble in the way that we reach our students. So like this, there's many, many lessons on the way that we support our students, many, many lessons on the pedagogy and the teaching of online, that I am committed to keeping that momentum forward, because what I want is classes that are taught really based on how our students learn best, right? That if a student feels that they're better online because some of the anonymity is something that makes it easier for them to participate, the flexibility allows them to do some things, that they have the choice to have classes in that modality. If their life circumstances, because they're parents, because they have jobs, require the flexibility, that we have that. But if it's a student that recognizes that the physical experience of the classroom is what they need, that we have that too, right? So we need to go to a much, much better mix of the delivery for our students moving forward. And I want to make sure that we keep that momentum as we get ready for the fall. One other area that I want to sort of share with this group, because of our shared interest, is one of my main areas of interest, and it's actually one of the reasons why I applied to the job at Hostos back in 2008 after serving as Commissioner of Family Services in Puerto Rico, is supporting our student parents, which in our case, the vast majority of the system, they're women, right? And they are an invisible student group that we need to get better at collecting data about them. They can easily be between 10 and 15% of all our students in the system, and they have incredible needs. And because I know that I'm in a room with innovative legislators, you do know that we're making great strides in the country with legislation that talks about 2-generation strategies, right? Working together to eradicate the circles of generational poverty by helping the kid, the children, and the parents. And at CUNY, the student parent population is a great opportunity to innovate in this field and do right for that student who's in the classroom, and also create the best possible pipeline for that child that is coming, that in all likelihood might be a CUNY student in several years down the line. So we're investing in some additional programming around 2-generational strategies. One program that we're hoping to pilot and expand this summer is a program that provides free tuition in the summer for student parents, so they can take 1 or 2 classes. But in addition, it would pay for, many of our campuses have summer camps, summer enrichment camps, right? That they can then have their kids participate in the campus in those programs. So it goes to address the summer melt of their children by keeping them engaged academically, but then providing academic momentum for the parents, because they're, keeping up their coursework by doing work in the summer. And we found in a pilot we did at Hostos that it was, really, really, the results in terms of the momentum from the students who were student parents was huge. So that's another area that I look forward to working with many of you in supporting our student parents in CUNY. I always find that the best time in these things is the Q&A, so I can address things that are of particular interest of all of you. One of the things that I do want to tell you that is a huge priority of mine, and it has an important effect on our female students, is our whole work on career engagement and career preparation. Is the one area, if CUNY has been the country's foremost leader in social mobility, right, by keeping access, by providing an education that is of quality and affordable, the one area where we have a lot more work to do is in engaging and preparing our students for the world of work. When you have about half of your students being first-generation college, we need to be the connector of that social capital, those networks for our students. So very, very, very committed to doing work on this area, reimagining our career centers, career service centers. We actually moved them and connect them to the area of workforce that used to report to student affairs. We want to connect them to the work that we're doing with our employers. I like to go down in history as the patron saint of paid internships. Paid internships put money in our students' pockets, right? And at our price point, think about it. If you give a student a paid internship that pays $3,000, right? That's about 1 year of tuition in a community college. If you get tap and pell, that extra money is your food insecurity money, is your transportation money, right? If you are paying out of pocket, right, it's almost as good as a scholarship. And we have data that shows that students that participate in paid internships, when they go get jobs, they get jobs faster and the first time pay is higher, right? So we're gonna be making huge investments in all kinds of programs. We've been modeling the Service Corps, right, which we used to do work on the census. Right? We have 600 students with paid internships knocking on the doors of all New Yorkers. So we were successful with the census, using the great assets culturally and linguistically that we have. So just know that that is one key area of interest of mine moving forward. So happy to take any questions and yield the floor back to the chair and to my good friend, the SUNY Chancellor.
Thank you, Chancellor Matos Rodriguez, for your wonderful leadership. And we will wait and do Q&A until our next Chancellor is finished, and then we'll do Q&A together. And I see that our SUNY Chancellor is joined by his great women staffers, Angela Wright and Lauren McCabe and Juliana Hernandez Camiso, and he also has a wonderful Vice Chancellor, Joanna Duncan. So he's surrounded by wonderful women advisors. Our SUNY Chancellor, Dr. Jim Malatros, was named the 14th Chancellor of the State University of New York on August 21st, 2020. Prior to his role leading the SUNY system, he served as the 5th president of the SUNY Empire State College. And prior to joining SUNY on May of 2019, he served as the Rockefeller Institute of Government, where he led the institution's modernization effort to offer policymakers evidence-based policy analysis and recommendations on timely topics. He has held several high-ranking positions in New York State government, including Director of State Operations to Governor Cuomo, where he managed day-to-day operations of state government and served as the administration's point person on policy development and implementation. An education policy expert, he served as the Executive Director of the Governor's New York Educational Reform Commission from 2012 to 2014. Executive Director of Legislative Affairs and State Policy to Attorney General Cuomo, and Legislative Director to former Assemblyman Richard Brodsky. We may have some members on today. I think Helene Weinstein and that remember Assemblyman Richard Brodsky and served with him, maybe when Chancellor Malatros was the Legislative Director. Dr. Malatros served as Chief of Staff for Chancellor Nancy Zimpher from July 2013 to August of 2014. And as Chairwoman Glick mentioned, families are greatly impacted by CUNY and SUNY and their experiences. My daughter is student body president at SUNY New Paltz, and I always get a text message how excited the students are when Chancellor Malatros is coming to town. And my son serves in student government as a student trustee at the SUNY Albany level. And so we are great fans of both the SUNY and CUNY systems. And thank you, Chancellor Malatros, for joining us today.
Thank you, Chair Seawright, for inviting me. I never like to go after Chancellor Matos Rodriguez because I always feel like I won't do as well. So I always try to go first because I'm less disappointing after he wows everybody. So I'll try my best. And that is true. Bradley is our student assembly representative, and we're proud of all the work that he does. He's a tenacious fighter for students, which was what I like. But Haley at New Paltz is more of a dynamo sometimes. She did a phenomenal job for students, especially when it came to transitioning on during COVID, and she is really engaged. I just saw her this week, actually. We went to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion in the faculty ranks. So It's great to have your two children in our system. CUNY is a great system, but we invite everybody, of course, to the SUNY system. And one other piece of trivia, since you threw trivia, I was the president of Empire State College. I love that college. Attorney General James is actually a faculty member at SUNY Empire, and she was our commencement speaker last year. So if you need more trivia for SUNY and CUNY, there's another trivia data point for you. I want to thank the chair, Assembly Member Glick. I've known her a long time, starting in the Assemblyman Brodsky days. I was just a young legislative aide. He gave me my chance, and he still used to call me. I miss him very much because he unfortunately passed last year, as we all know. But I always looked forward to those calls early in the morning where he was telling me how I was still messing up things. I always appreciated that grounding from Mr. Brodsky. But Assemblymember Glick has done a phenomenal job for us on the higher education side. Without her advocacy, we would not be where we are, which I want to talk about in a second. Equity, diversity, equity, inclusion is something that's really important to us. 56% of all of our students are female. It's the largest demographic we have. We have done some good work on our front. Overall, our staff is 56% of all of our staff are female, which is good at SUNY. But only 50% are faculty. So we have some work to do there. We also have some work to do on our leadership side. Our presidents, 34% of our presidents currently are female, although we're changing that. I've been able to appoint several presidents in my short tenure, and 60% of our recent appointments have been diverse female candidates, which has been really important for us. We've had some great candidates. Dr. Bert Nana, who's going to be the new president of Monroe Community College, one of our best community colleges, for instance, is starting soon, which we're really excited about. You're right about my senior staff. I have all of my top senior staff are women. And I think that's why I'm doing the job I'm doing, because I have great leadership in that front. And it's diverse leadership. My provost is Shadi Shedhapur Sandvik, our chief academic officer. She's of Iranian descent. She's great. Beth Berlin, who many of you know, she was the commissioner of state education department. She is our chief operating officer. So there are two senior level positions. And then our chief diversity officer, Terry Miller, who many of you worked with, is a phenomenal representative on diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as our chief financial officer, Eileen McLaughlin, Sandra Casey, our general counsel. We hope to have some exciting news about a permanent general counsel from a community of color who is phenomenal. We can't announce that yet. And then several other of our staff. The COVID crisis has impacted our students, particularly our female students, greatly. Unlike CUNY, I know Chancellor Matos Rodriguez talked about where they were mostly remote. We, in the fall, had about 140,000 of our 400,000 typical students on campus. This semester, we have about 115,000 of our 400,000 students on campus, and it's been difficult. There's a lot of social isolation. There's a lot of difficulty of fear of the unknown with the virus. We've done a lot of good work. Our students have done a great job on testing. We require testing every week. By the way, our positivity rate on our student campuses is 0.19% versus the statewide average of about 3.6%. Our students have done a great job, but there's real issues there. Food insecurity, childcare, these are all issues that are predominantly impacting our female students. And one of our growing demographic of students is the 25 to 44-year-old demographic. Many parents who have really struggled. I do this by example sometimes because the best thing is you could talk to students all day long. The head of the Sullivan County Community College Student Government Association, her name is Shantae Anderson. She's a single mother with 2 children. She's trying to go to college herself. One of her children have a disability. She's trying to do remote learning and in-class learning while both of her children are home trying to do online learning. They're trying to get access to broadband in Sullivan County, New York, and they don't have enough broadband access in order to have everybody live on camera. She's trying to find childcare options, and we serve about 5,000 traditionally in our 48 childcare centers, but 5,000 of our students have that, but there's been issues there. Food insecurity was a major concern. So we're trying to beef up all of those things. And I'm going to get to your support, which is crucial in a second. We've done as much as we've done. Unfortunately, we've expanded our food pantries on every one of our campuses. We're putting out grants for refrigeration so there's proteins, but there shouldn't be a reason why any college campus has a food pantry. That's the unfortunate matter. That's where we are. We're happy to support those things, but SNAP benefits is another one. We're now automatically enrolling our students at the EOCs right now in SNAP. Only a quarter of our students who are eligible for SNAP are actually enrolling in SNAP, which we think was problematic. Chancellor Matos Rodriguez and I, working together with you all, were able to change the work rule, which we thought was important. So you're not choosing between 20 hours of work or 20 hours of school in order to get a meal, or choose between education and a meal. So those are things. The mental health and wellness side, like I mentioned, the social isolation component of many of our students on campus, they're living in by themselves on dormitories. They don't have access to activities in person. It's a lot of Zoom activities, which people are struggling with. These have all been struggles, but we feel like you see the turn now because we're coming around the other side of this. The stimulus money, thanks to our great Senators Schumer, Gillibrand, and our congressional delegation, Hakeem Jeffries and others, we have a lot of direct student aid and support, which we've been able to be helpful with. We put out $135 million in refunds, for instance, for meals and things like that, $236 million of direct aid, and we have another $470 million of direct aid coming to our students, which they desperately need. We appreciate all that you are doing, working with us on helping our healthcare heroes. That's another area. Our staff, especially our female staff, our professional health staff at SUNY Downstate and SUNY Upstate, frontline healthcare workers who've been through a tremendous amount. While other institutions have been able to do hazard pay and other things, we have not been able to really address those issues. We're working on it on our side, and we're helpful and grateful for your support. Many of those healthcare workers that we are dealing with in our hospitals are underrepresented and minority female workers who are already facing great disparities in society and inequities in society as it is being perpetuated and exacerbated because of the crisis. So everything we could do there to help. And then beyond this federal money, which is basically a one shot for us, your commitment to us in this budget is instrumental. The operating aid that you've been able to propose is going to help us be stronger long-term. The capital investment is critically important. I was just at the Educational Opportunity Center in Manhattan, for instance. It's literally falling down. It's falling into itself. I mean, how do you expect someone to learn if the walls are caving in on students who just want an opportunity? So that capital investment is critical. The TAP gap plan to close the TAP gap, we've been saying that for years, and you've come through in a major way. And then programs which are really important for access and equity. The Educational Opportunity Program is one of the most important programs in the SUNY system. It's why many people were able to go to college and get the support and be successful. The retention rates and the graduation rates are higher in the Educational Opportunities and the programs. You've increased the opportunity program significantly, which will only open up more doors of opportunity for our students. So we really appreciate that, including the medical EOP program, which we think is going to be a game changer, especially for female underrepresented communities. So all of those things, the mental health restorations, the childcare restorations, all of those things are really important. And as Chancellor Matos Rodriguez said, there's an opportunity in this crisis, and I'd love to talk to you about this as well. We've been able to focus on some of our student academic needs with this, not just the mental health and wellness and other issues. We're putting out grants for research opportunities for students. We have several that we've given out to focus on COVID or the next crisis, led by research teams of female faculty and female students, which we really like. We have programs like the Center for Law and Policy Solutions at the Rockefeller Institute, which many of you helped many of the cohorts of students, which has been a great program. First, we're taking students who normally don't have access to paid internships, and it's a paid internship like Chancellor Matos Rodriguez said, because often many lower income students don't have the opportunities because they're choosing between work and education. And if you don't give them some incentive, they can't do those things as other students do. For instance, one of the recent cohorts at the Center for Law and Policy Solutions, where we gave them a grant, we treated them like regular researchers, did the study on the Reproductive Health Act. You all opened your doors to these 5 female students. You gave them access to policymakers. They produced the state-of-the-art report that got a lot of international and national attention actually in the news. And that's a great thing for their CV. So students who wouldn't normally have that opportunity were taking these moments. And then the critical support that you've all given us on like the Prodigy funding that helps us have a more diverse faculty body, which is really important, not just on the ratio between female students and faculty members, which we have to do a little better on, but also different socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicities. The recent cohort we've done, we just announced 72 new Prodigy faculty, which we're really happy about on 21 campuses. 70% or 80%, sorry, of those who were hired under the program are female faculty members. So it goes a long way. And then the final piece before we get into this, because I think SUNY and CUNY is the two institutions that provides the most social and economic mobility on dollars and cents. There's the Equality of Opportunity Project, the Raj Chetty Project, who's now at Harvard, used to be at Stanford. The data show you go to a SUNY or a CUNY, you have the most chance of success at life. And that's why you need to invest in public higher education. By the way, I'm a product of public higher education. I'm the first SUNY graduate to become chancellor of the institution. Some people use it as a knock against me, which I thought was a little strange. Like, he only went to SUNY. Well, I'm proud of that. I think it's a great place to be. And I'm only sitting here because of SUNY. But the real challenge we have out of COVID is an enrollment challenge. Enrollment is a real issue, but it's not an enrollment challenge in our book, because if you look at the data, it's an equity challenge, where we're seeing declining enrollment, where we're seeing declining applications are from underserved, underrepresented communities. Somewhere our applications are down 40% in some of those communities. So we're doing everything we can to try to bridge those gaps. We're eliminating application fees for students because we don't think that should be a burden for them. We're trying to sign them up for services like SNAP and other things, so we make it as seamless as possible. But there's a lot of challenges, but from all of this, a lot of opportunities. And I thank you all for all of your support during this budget process, because it's been a fabulous thing to rally our students, our faculty, and staff behind. So I'll now turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Malatras. And again, thank you to both chancellors for joining us this morning and for your expertise in higher education. And we're going to now move to a Q&A format. I want to recognize the assemblywomen that are on: Jennifer Rockjamar, Diana Richardson, Anna Kellis, Judy Griffin, Carmen De La Rosa, Taylor Darling, Jamie Williams, Jennifer Lunsford, Karen McMahon, Sarah Clark, Vivian Cook, Catalina Cruz, Pat Fahey, Sandy Galiff, Deborah Glick, Aileen Gunther, Chantel Jackson, Marianne Butenshawn, Stephanie Zinnerman, Stacy Pfeffer Amato, Joanne Simon, and Jessica Gonzalez Rojas. Raise your hand if I missed anyone. All right, raise your hand if you have a question. Anna Kellis, who I believe represents Cornell University, a new member. Anna, you're up. Unmute Anna Kellis.
Thank you. So glad to be here for this conversation. Also a proud graduate of SUNY B, SUNY Binghamton. So this is part of my system as well. My sister also graduated from SUNY Binghamton. My other sister graduated from SUNY New Paltz. So definitely a family tradition. So I figured I'd add that to the thread of all of us proud graduates. And just a question about faculty. So as you know, I have, of course, SUNY Cortland and community colleges and the SUNY system within Cornell. And there, of course, unfortunately, has been sort of this trend of moving to part-time faculty, adjunct faculty, non-tenured faculty across the country. This is not unique to SUNY or CUNY, but I would love to hear a bit about plans to invest in the classroom instruction and efforts to push for more full-time faculty or tenured faculty. And reversing that trend over time, making sure that we get all of the students there, that they have access, across, that anybody who wants access to education, that's wonderful, but making sure the quality of that education is maintained. So I'd love to hear both CUNY and SUNY thoughts on that, on those efforts and the funding that's within the operating budget that was allocated. What of that is being put into that effort?
I'll start and I mean, clearly, right? We're in total agreement that we'd like to see more full-time faculty in our classrooms, right? And the adjunct thing also needs to be clarified, right? Because we have probably about a third our adjuncts are individuals who are full-time adjuncts, if you wish, right? So we have a lot of adjuncts who are maybe some of you who are teaching a class, right? And clearly that kind of flexibility is something that you want, particularly if you want your students to be more connected with individuals who are out there in the world of work, right? And bringing that experience more quickly and more efficiently to our students. So no debate that we want more full-time faculty. And it is mostly something driven by economics, right? In the sense of you always want to have some flexibility on the enrollment side, right? But it's a fiscal question. One of the things that I did when I became chancellor was we were negotiating the new contract, right? And not only was the right thing to increase the pay for our adjuncts, right? But also in the negotiations, I try to move that number to the max, which I think next year hits about $5,200 or $5,400. I forget the amount, right? But it's also constructed on, I'm hoping that when you reach that, if you're on a campus, it might be almost the same economically for you to hire a full-time lecturer, right? Which are the faculty members that do not have research responsibilities, but they're full-time, they're teaching and engaging the students as it is to hire 7 or 8 adjuncts to have the same workload, right? So I'm actually hoping that when we get to that point, some of the internal economics, right, will make us then switch to more full-time lines, right? Because it be fiscally similar, right? Which I think is one first way to do this. The other thing is that we have included our adjuncts in all the things that we've done. For example, we train about 3,500 faculty in online instruction as we all move to people for this, and we pay them for participating in this professional development, and it was open to adjuncts. So the adjuncts were totally open. So we all thought that those are additional professional development credentials that they will have to be more competitive should full-time jobs open up, right? By having all these additional teaching credentials. So fully on board with that. And I'm actually hopeful that particularly in the, not the next fiscal year, but the other one, when the full adjunct rates in our contract, that it would make some of that economics, and that we might then have something creative to hire more full-time faculty because it'd be similar to do that. And right now, there's a big disincentive in that gap.
Yeah, I agree with what the chancellor's saying. I think the investment that you made on the operating side will allow us to hire more full-time faculty. I think our balance right now is about 50-50 in our system. That's one thing, because you have a bleed within the system, right? If the economics are, I'm making $35,000 as a faculty member, I'm just going to leave academics because it's just an unsustainable model, right? As a family, you can't raise a family on that. So I think your investment on the state side is invaluable to allowing us to bring in full-time folks as a balance to adjuncts and part-time, which sometimes are utility to that, right? I'm a adjunct faculty member because I have a job. I do think it's important for administrators to teach or be in the classroom. So for instance, my provost still works with her research lab at SUNY Poly, because you want to be close to students. You want to understand what it feels like to be a faculty member, because if you don't really understand it, it's hard to help faculty, right? So I taught last semester. I'm going to teach in the fall again. So I think that helps. So I think that is one thing. The second thing is how do you incentivize really dynamic faculty to come into our systems? I think the chancellor and I both have this. If you just looked at what we did at SUNY Upstate recently, many of your members were there, Assembly Member Barrett and others, which was great. On the new lab, the level 3 lab that looked at airborne Lyme disease, other tick issues, which is a big issue, we were able to take the entire national leading lab from Texas, and we hired everyone away to upstate New York, Syracuse, which, by the way, will only have a net benefit for us to say, look, what we just hired here come to the SUNY system. The state of New York is investing operating dollars and we'll have the resources for you. And now we can get nationally known faculty members, which gets us better faculty members anyway. So I think all of this
Okay,
working
my
together helps.
hand raising
Yeah,
function
as
is
a
not
SUNY
working.
faculty member myself, I like
T1.
it's a good topic.
Yeah.
I thank you for all your information.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblywoman Pat Fahey, who represents University of Albany.
Thank you, and thank you, Assemblywoman Seawright, for doing this. As we close out the month, I actually just was in and out of one that the SUNY students did for Women Empowerment ceremony. So I had both going for a few moments there, and that was great to see all the women of SUNY, and mostly students. So terrific, and thanks to both chancellors for all your efforts, all your work. I really appreciate it. I want to, well, if this can go to either of you, but Chancellor Malatras, I really appreciate you talking about the isolation that we have seen of the students, and that if I caught your numbers correctly, it's still just about 1/4 of the students are back on campus. And I think it's some of the mental health crises. I'm very focused on getting a letter out about a 3-foot ruling to get our students back in. A lot of our urban upstate students are not in general terms, at least in middle and high school. So you also mentioned addressing some of the mental health needs as well as internships. And I see all of that combined. The more they engage, the better they are, the better off all are. Can you just talk a little bit more about any new programs? I know there's a model one that's been in place for 40 years or something at UAlbany, and I'm gonna forget the name. It's got a cute name to it. But can you talk a little bit about like what we are doing? Because I just think it's a crisis right across the road, right across the board. I've had a young UAlbany student here working with me half-time. All her classes, this is not a slam on UAlbany, but all her classes were remote. She really struggled with it. So any extra efforts, I just want to give you a chance to elaborate what you already touched on, because I really think it's the crisis, not just for women, but obviously all students. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really important question. It's not, so having 1/4 of our students on campus, there's an isolation to that. But many of our students who are home still are facing a similar isolation, almost more so, with additional burdens. So we expanded all of our mental health services across the board. And I thought it was really important. We announced an expansion in October. We expanded a service called Thriving Campus. Some students did not want to get mental health and wellness services on campus because of the stigma attached to it. They were fearful. So this is a service where they can use an app that goes to local service providers that will help them with insurance issues or if they're free services. Very discreet, that we basically stood up for free for our students. We set up 2 telehealth hubs, one at SUNY Upstate, one at SUNY Downstate. Some people need more professional services. We couldn't get people to doctors' offices, psychiatry services. We have now split it up where our doctors, our psychiatrists, psychologists, and others are providing telehealth for our students. Anybody's eligible across the system. Some students just wanted peer-to-peer. They did not want professional help. They just wanted to talk to students. That's Middle Earth. That's the UAlbany site. We opened up the peer-to-peer network for every student in the system, and they love that program. They get to talk to a trained student. Sometimes that's just the issue. I want to bat things off of folks. We have a crisis text hotline, and now we're doing crisis prevention training. It's a course for our faculty and our staff. We've expanded. This came from students, actually, the Student Assembly and the Student Voices Committee, 2 of the committees that we stand up to listen to student needs, where they want to train RAs and RDs, because many of these students who help other students, they're overwhelmed and they don't know how to provide services. So we've done a lot on that front. It's still good. I think it's going to be a challenge. I think the biggest challenge that we're actually hearing from students now is as they come back in the fall, which we're all excited about, by the way. It might be more masks, but we're planning on having 400,000 students back. We're testing, we're doing all those things. I think the psychological impact of the virus has actually gone the opposite way. The other day, I made a demonstration at Mohawk Valley Community College. I sat really close to one of the faculty members, and they were like, "Why are you so close to me?" Any other period in our history, that's how we sat next to each other. But there is a little bit of this social divide. So there's a lot of work, even in the fall and beyond, that we have to work through. So your help in the budget, by the way, which helped restore many of these things, will only help us do more for students, because it's not enough, but we're going to have to continue to invest in these things, because if you don't have the mental health and wellness services, they're not going to do well academically. They're going to drop out of college. They're not going to be successful in careers. So this down payment helps them in the long run.
Middle Earth, that's the name of it. I have an entire team from UAlbany, even the ones that went years ago, all know this Middle Earth peer-to-peer, and I hope you can replicate it. Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Chantel Jackson, you're up.
Oh my God, I'm driving back from Albany. How's my sound?
Good, good.
Oh, thank God. Okay, so I don't have a CUNY or a SUNY in my district. I'm hoping to still host those from Amanda Septimo. But proud City College graduate. My daughter's right now at FIT. My parents went to CUNY as well. So I just want to know like how the Excelsior Scholarship has been working for students. I had some feedback saying that there was some disconnect between the systems that process Excelsior. So some students had to pay out of pocket, both because the Excelsior Scholarship did come through. Hiring more academic advisor, and she lost her TAP scholarship because of this advisor she had. And I think it's because we don't have enough advisors on staff. So just those two.
Chancellor, you want to go first? And
Well, I mean, the key point is the need for improved advising to make sure that no student falls through the cracks, right? In some of the, sometimes they are, there might be bureaucratic delays in, us connecting with HES to be able to get some of the information, and to the extent that you have people working closely with the students that can explain what's going on, be alert us about those things quickly so that we can make all the different adjustments that we can in working with the agencies. That's I think really the key in terms of making sure that our students get the right advice about the courses they take, so there's no eligibility issues with Excelsior, TAP, and all of that. So I mean, on our end, what I tell the student leaders is whenever students are facing challenges, to sort of take it up, right? Because those things come in a menu of things, right? As you probably all of you know from working with constituents, right? The stories that come to us are not always complete stories, right? And sometimes there's things that the students fail to do. There's sometimes things the students fail to do because nobody given the advisement. So for us, the additional investment in personnel that can give our students very nuanced information about their financial situation, the options that they have to be able to explain all those things. It's very, very important. For that, we need additional support from the state to be able to have the individuals to to do that. When I was at Hostos, one of the things that we began was the student success coaches, because I wanted each student on the campus to be able to have one person, because what happens in many times now is that the advisors, you go to the financial aid office, so you see whoever is either, in the queue, or if they're divided by classes, however the things are, but you might not have the same consistent person helping you in those things, or you have an advisor, in our case, because you're part of the ASAP program. If you drop from ASAP, you don't have that advisor. I wanted at Hostos that every student had one advisor assigned today from the day they came to campus until the day they left, right? If they got additional help from other things, hallelujah, right? But there was somebody who knew you and stayed with you. Even if you withdrew, they'd be trying to bring you back, right? Because they had that more personal connection. So the last point you made about the need for the advising, that's what makes all the great support programs that we have in the state, TAP, Excelsior, all those things work more efficiently.
I think that concept of mentoring, Empire State College was a college without borders concept that was created in 1971. Every student gets a faculty mentor, regardless if they are in the class for the entirety of their college career. So they have a person they can go to work through issues. It's like the EOP program. And students who normally have a success coach or a mentor through a process usually has higher retention rates and graduation rates. Because, right, this is a really complex organization. You know, they joke about it from Hamilton, but when you ask someone, go to the bursar's office to pay your bill, they don't know what a bursar is, right? Like there's like terminology that folks don't even understand. Or if I go into these academic programs, how do I get a degree? So I think that's a really key piece. The one thing I'd like to flip on it on the incentive side, and I was part of the folks who helped devise the Excelsior program, but it was for a very specific reason. It was a completion program for full-time, largely students that came out of high school in a 4-year, 2-year program. But the world is changing in higher education so dramatically. Like our community college network, and I'm sure Chancellor Matos Rodriguez has the same thing. Folks are getting older in community colleges. They're coming out of the workforce into a community college because they need upskilling. So they're not taking 4 or 5 years because they're just not succeeding in college. It's they're working, they have a family, they're taking 1 or 2 courses over time. It's very much an intentional thing. Or they're doing micro-credentialing, right? They're doing stacking of credentials, certifications into associate's degrees. But our financial aid structure does not match that type of student. TAP, Excelsior, these programs are very traditional programs with the traditional student program, traditional student in mind. By the way, I don't like the name traditional student because then you're a non-traditional student. Then a non-traditional student sounds like you're something other than a student, which drives me crazy because it makes them feel like they're outwardly or others. So we just call them students. But some of our students who are working adults or coming back from the workforce, we don't really have an incentive program for them where you can say, you know what? You're taking 5 years because you want to take 5 years because you're working, you're getting toward a degree. I think we almost have to make more flexible our financial aid models for folks because that's what they need. So, right, why limit people in these windows all the time where that may not be what's fitting them in their life circumstances?
Thank you, Chancellors. Next up, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas.
Thank you both so much. Thank you to our chair, C. Wright, for bringing us together. My question is really similar to Assemblywoman Fahey, so I won't repeat it because I'm just, again, concerned about the mental health, and I'm really glad to hear about the many programs that are offered. To go a little bit further, I was actually a adjunct at City College in the Latin American Studies department. And the one thing I saw with my students was several were in domestic violence situations, and, you know, willing to talk about it or not, they were dealing with their challenges. But I'm curious if in this moment we know that intimate partner violence and domestic violence has been on the rise across communities, in my community in particular, Latinx community. And I'm just curious if that's come up in terms of the specific types of mental health issues that have come up, and safety, and, and how the school's addressing it during a time that it must be really difficult since most of the students aren't in person. So I'm just curious how the bodies are addressing intimate partner violence.
I mean, in our end, it has come up in our conversations from feedback that we get on the large mental rubric of how the student is doing, right, and the mental health and all of that, particularly coming from our student support services. It is something that I know that it has been brought up from our campuses, right, an uptick in that, and then having to also rethink. I mean, some of the strategies, right, that you have when you're physically on the campus, right, when you have the contact with the person, it becomes easier now that we have to depend, in our case, right, being mostly virtual. How do you get that level of confianza, of intimacy, of people coming to you? And I'll be happy because I do know that our new, fairly new by now, Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, Denise Maybach, was having some conversations with her student affairs team on this particular subject. So if you don't mind, let me do some homework and get back to the group of some of the things that they're doing, because I mean, it is clearly one of the things that we were noticing, and in some of the investments that we were making on mental health platforms and programs, we were trying to find out ones that were sort of more gear in that direction so that we can beef up what we're doing there. So, you know, and that, right, will continue next year, no matter how things play out, and will continue to be an issue moving forward. So that's why, I mean, you know, from my end, the incredible support that you all showed higher ed in your One House bill, right? Because at the end of the day, the money that goes for specific things help, but money that goes into the larger things, more money for TAP, money to cover for the TAP gap, all that is then money that we have flexibility to invest in the things that are needed, right? So I do want to commend all of you for incredible leadership in, one of the most aspirational One House bills that I've seen since I've been associated with CUNY. So thank you for that support, because that allows us to do the kind of investments on the kinds of programs that you're talking about. But let me get specific info on that, because I do know that our student affairs folks were working with that particular issue. But thank you for raising that up.
Interestingly enough, since 2015, the number of cases filed went through the roof at SUNY, but it wasn't because there were more cases, we don't think. Because we changed the rules to make it easier for victims to go through the process right under the Enough is Enough program. So on some level, it was like working. This year's been a bit of a drop off because few of our students are on campus. So I think that kind of masks a little bit the crisis that you may have. It's not being reported at campus any longer. It's probably being reported through a home outlet. But we do notice, I go back to Empire State College because we had a lot of adult learners. The number one reason for women dropping out of our program was due to domestic violence. That was a shocking thing to me. So what we did there quietly, because we didn't want it to be a stigma attached thing, we built wraparound services for former students. We did outreach. We connected them to agencies and services, non-for-profits, as a way to get them connected to that help that they needed. And then we worked with them on the academic side so they can slowly ease their way back in, because in many cases they had children that they were worrying about. They were moving out of homes, right? There's so much disruption in their lives that we worked with them very closely on that front. So anecdotally, that was in one campus on the adult side, that was the number one reason for dropping out of college. And we did some wraparound work there. Our numbers are a little down, but I think it's artificial due to the fact that students aren't on campus as much this year.
Thank you, Chancellors. Mary Ann Butenshawn, who has a SUNY campus and is a professor. You're up.
Yes, thanks. Absolutely, thank you so much. As you know, I have SUNY Poly 2 community colleges, Herkimer and MV, Mohawk Valley, and I apologize, I would have stopped over to visit with you. No faculty should not want you near, so no, I could say that I, as a 10-year adjunct at the college, through the process, and then full-time, and then into administration. So thank you to both of the chancellors. I just want to echo the thoughts of my colleague Kellis in regards to that ratio of full-time, part-time staff. As you know, the full-time spends quite a bit of time with curriculum development modification. And I think that it's so important as you talk about the linkage between our faculty and the students. I know the mentor programs work, but I can say in my years of 20 plus years at a community college setting, having that faculty connection with those students and that student being able to find that faculty pretty easily versus just a few hours a day created a great mentoring process. I know during the hearings, I talked a little bit about the recovery plan that we're all looking exciting and moving forward as we ease out of this pandemic. And I hope it's quicker than, but as I talk to the small businesses, large businesses, I remind them of the importance of community colleges and SUNY and what they can do. So I would ask enthusiastically that you would accept the challenge to try to expand those partnerships as far as they can go at this time. As I talk to various college presidents, that this is the time, because you have the expertise, you have the the knowledge, the research, and I think as Pat Fahey talked about the students for internships, that it just is a great point that we could work within these partnerships, which I know you're doing. I want to use an example. There's a bill, Meet New York, which promotes New York products and services to be exported to other states as well as throughout internationally, is that we should be so proud of what we have in this state. And that's what I hear. And I want to make sure that everyone knows how great we are in New York of what we can provide. And you're that catalyst. So to Pat's point and others regarding the mental health, I thank you so much for that, because this is just something. And the only learning environment that in regards to online is just to take a close look at that assessment, as so many are first time students that come to us, and clearly online is not for them. And so we need to try to provide looking at actually success rates in those assessments, which I know you're doing, but I'm a firm believer in that assessment. So I thank you for what you're doing, and sincerely appreciate the efforts, and look forward to you being, again, that staple in our recovery in this great state of New York.
I'll start first. Thank you. We did an event when I first became chancellor at SUNY Poly, where you came, we were giving out those grants to students and faculty on developing the next technology. And I can't wait to come and report back how they're doing, because some phenomenal stuff coming out of it. So thank you for that. The community college, by the way, the network of community colleges, is something that we have to support more. They are the foundational access point. And that's why we're trying to connect our educational opportunity centers more to our community colleges, because sometimes you need that basic level certification to get into our community colleges. But I hate this second class citizen piece with community colleges. People say, well, they do auto tech. I said, fine, it's great until your car breaks down and you can't fix it. And there's a need. And by the way, it's really highly technical stuff now, and it's circuitry and it's computerization. It's stuff that I don't understand, by the way. I couldn't run a community college program on that. I know what mechatronics is, right? There's all levels of complexity that produces well-paying jobs for folks that we need to just connect people to. So I agree. There's so much more we can be doing on the community college front and workforce development in a real and meaningful way. New York based, which would be great.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So we have Assemblywoman Judy Griffin to close. I'm looking at the Hollywood Squares here, and I believe she's the last hand raised.
Okay, well, great. It's been a very informative discussion. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Rebecca, for setting this up. I was really happy to hear about the efforts regarding mental health, so necessary. This is a question I asked at higher ed hearing, and I just thought it was worth asking again. I have noticed constituents have spoken to me about this when they're choosing a college.
Ready, Ed?
That they often are interested in SUNY. Let me just say I'm also a SUNY graduate from Oneonta. And so I'm a big supporter of SUNY schools. But a lot of kids with special ed disabilities need a really elaborate, dedicated program to suit their needs. And I've heard from various constituents that that was why they didn't choose a SUNY. Their student may have gotten into a SUNY, but there were programs more dedicated in other private schools. And so I just wanted to ask that again, just to see, what is really being done for that, like more dedicated programs. A lot of times there's schools that have like some kind of clinics or have things, but it just isn't enough. And a lot of those students end up dropping out because they just can't hack it. So that was one question. And then my other is, I've asked this before, but not recently, when we had another chancellor. Is it possible that I can find the number, maybe if I can't find the amount of students, can I get the number of students that use the Excelsior or got awarded the Excelsior scholarship? Because I ask kids all the time when I'm around my district, And I literally have never met one person that has the Excelsior Scholarship. So I always think that would be really great if I knew how many. That would be a great thing. And something else I've mentioned to the previous chancellor, like you said before, Chancellor, a lot of when you get into a SUNY, people are like, oh, you get into a SUNY, oh, you graduate from SUNY. But I think we need to have much better marketing effort for SUNY to celebrate kids getting to SUNY. They're great schools. They're hard to get into. You get a great education, great opportunity. And I suggested this before that I think last year we got SUNY scarves, maybe another year we got SUNY mugs. And I think it would be nice. There's so many SUNY graduates who are in the legislature that if we could have some kind of contest where like the school that has the most SUNY freshmen starting next year will get that SUNY mug or will get something. So we as SUNY alumni can go to those schools and make a bigger deal of it, because I just had an intern that just graduated, or he's still attending SUNY Cortland, and he said the same thing. Like, people always champion like, oh, you got into Villanova, people like rah rah, and then you get into a SUNY and people like, oh good, that you got into a SUNY. So I just think that would be a great thing if like a marketing effort was spent on really raising awareness and making it more of a celebration for students when they get into a SUNY.
I agree with that. The oh good or that's okay isn't a really great marketing strategy. This is what we'd like you to. We have a person named Kyle Adams. What often happens in higher education, we bring in these like high-paid consultants and they give us these glossy marketing and it all looks the same. But that's not who we are. Kyle gets at the humanity of SUNY, the student body, the faculty body. I would love for him to come and talk to you about like what we're thinking and how we can help inform that, because I think that's what we're about. And I think there's a real enthusiasm for that. The Excelsior piece will just get you the number. So I'll just have our staff is taking notes. We'll get you that number. I just want to, before Assemblymember Buttonshon mentioned it, the online learning piece is something we do have to learn from the pandemic. We talk about online, but there was synchronous learning and there's a lot of asynchronous learning. And our students complained a lot about asynchronous learning. I'm living in a dormitory, I'm all online, but I'm online taking video classes, not interacting with live people, which only perpetuated the mental health and isolation issues. So we, going forward, online has a value in opening up opportunity, but we have to balance this on more synchronous. I taught for the first time online, but it was live. It was in person, just over Zoom. And the disability piece is something, so what is really important to me as well, and this is something we hear a lot too. We started this at SUNY Empire on the autism side. And by the way, Assemblymember Simon has worked on the learning disability side when it comes to dyslexia and other issues, but that carries through into college as well. We have an issue where we are not, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, we have to talk about students with special needs or disabilities. You might be on the autism spectrum and able to go to college, but if you're not able to meet that student's needs, they're not going to be successful. So we started there. We started something called the Center for Autism Inclusion, which isn't just training people to go out into the workforce to work with folks with autism. It was about training our faculty, our staff, and the rest of our student body to say, this is how you have to be more inclusive of every student, but we have to take that to scale across the system. We're putting together a task force actually where we want concrete things like we did on mental health. Don't give us a plan, give us like concrete things like I just enumerated. I would love for you all, whoever's interested, to be part of that as well, because you get the external student constituency perspective. So as we stand that up, we'll make sure that we reach out to you and have you involved in that. But we're going to have, I think one of our co-chairs is going to be the president of Empire State College, because they're doing a lot of good work there. We're fleshing that out now, but we'll keep you involved on that piece.
Okay, that's great. I would be very interested. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just add, two things. It's interesting and because I've had a little bit of a different experience finding out many students coming to CUNYs who have disabilities, in part because, and they will tell you, right, that some of the privates didn't have the support services for them, right? So it's an interesting dilemma. And again, people go to schools where they feel they're going to be respected and their needs are going to be met, right? And we've, one of my main concerns over the pandemic is that support services for students with disabilities, right? In a more virtual setting, because they, in many cases, depend heavily on that engagement with our campus office of student with disabilities. And I mean, we just did a press release last week on great services that we do for students with autism, particularly in some of our campuses like Staten Island, that have really broadened that level of support. So you know, but clearly always more that need to be done, and some disparities in some of our campuses. On the marketing side, I'll say two things, right? You know, one is and don't shoot the messenger. I think Chancellor Matos and I would believe that getting the word out and marketing is sharing the good news about the phenomenal faculty that we have, the resources, the opportunities, right? I mean, that's what we're telling, the great stories that you all know, either from personal experience or from your constituents that are happening on the campuses, right? Always things that need to be improved, but that's really marketing and the brand. So whenever we spend a little more money on that, right? Particularly our friends from labor complain about that money not going to student services and other things, right? So, you know, I'm just saying, all this is part of getting additional resources to be able to have the students there, have resources for them. So I just point that out as something that happens occasionally when you want to have some more investments in that area. But one thing that we're doing, and it's connected to what I spoke about in career engagement and readiness, is that intensive work with industry is a great way to break some of the myths about the marketing in our schools. I'll give you one example. I went in to see the board of Bank of New York Mellon, who funded a transfer scholarship from our ASAP students from community colleges to the four-year colleges. We're doing great work in Upskill Challenge to help our students who recently graduated with all kinds of courses for free so they can enter the labor market better, all funded by them. So I went into a presentation, right? And just for a very basic tool, LinkedIn, right? 15% of other employees in New York City were CUNY graduates. They didn't know that, right? And when I went in and showed them the data, they then began to use some of those employees to do work with us. We had an entire engagement, for example, with Bloomberg about paid internships, but also hiring after that, right? The entire initiative ended up being that all the mentoring, all the courses, all the work that Bloomberg did to train our students was done by Bloomberg employees who were CUNY graduates, right? Who then created an affinity group and then went back to the schools. So those are, I mean, that's not the mug and that's not the banner, right? But that is the strength of a brand, right? When you engage the alumni. And if we do work, I mean, our work with career engagement well, it's an added way to bring in the alumni and improve things. So I'm just gonna put that out there for consideration.
All right, thank you, Joanne Simon. And after Joanne, Diana Richardson to close.
So thank you. You know, I appreciate the question that Member Griffin asked and raising this issue about disability services. Many, many years ago, I don't want to tell you just how long ago, because I date myself, I directed a disability services office at Gallaudet, actually. And it was in the early days of Section 504, so we were making it up as we went along a bit there, but I've been connected to that community for years. And there are a couple of things that I think would be very helpful and that I'm hearing from students. Number one, obviously, is funding. That's a big issue about funding for those services. And then the sort of level of sophistication of those services and the need, which is not like a required accommodation, but really what a lot of students need is specialized tutoring. Blind students in math, for example, students with learning disabilities in various aspects. It could be reading, it could be math, it could be other things, but that kind of specialized tutoring is one of the things that keeps a lot of students from succeeding, and they don't have access to that. And then the other thing is with the new products that are being used, a lot of the online stuff, Blackboard, for example, they're not very accessible technologies. And the even where they have like a captioning function, it goes too fast for students who have difficulty reading. And so then we're asking students, and I've heard this from students who don't, not even students with disabilities, but you're actually asking students to use a lot more working memory than they would normally use because it's this online and it's there's no kinesthetic feedback kind of thing. It's a very flat, kind of technology. So they're reading more, they can't read as fast. If you don't have page numbers, I know the bar exam, one of the concerns that a lot of people had in this particular part of the exam was like a 15-page document from which you had to write a brief or a memo or something, but they never paginated it. So how do you go back and find that? It's like this big lump. And so we forget sometimes those things that you have in, in a book, like page numbers, we don't have in sometimes the source materials that are online. And so there are a lot of aspects of that I think if we're drilled down a bit in a kind of a way, a collaborative way with students and with faculty, because the faculty don't realize that some of these products are not as accessible and they're getting used to them themselves. But I think the power of the purse between SUNY and CUNY can make these products become more accessible and build in accessibility features in the beginning. And so I just wanted to raise that issue and encourage you in that direction.
Well, we would work with CUNY on that front for sure. This is where I get in trouble as a chancellor, I guess. Blackboard is the main provider of the academic online sort of hub. Personally, I think Blackboard stinks. It's like a Windows 95 product in the modern world. It doesn't have the interface that even a modern student uses. And by the way, I taught last semester. They used Blackboard in Empire State. I didn't even use it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a Zoom and I'm going to email you folks your assignments because I can't figure out how to do all of this and it's not user friendly. So I think it would be great to find a platform that actually works quite well. Of course, the minute you get a platform in higher education, it's obsolete, but figuring out where you can build out. We would work with CUNY on that piece. And you're right, as open educational resources become more prevalent, not just on the online space, but because we're concerned about cost of books and cost of external things so students don't have to pay, you have to have those other considerations, right? So it's a good thing, but it has to be done in a way that students can actually learn from. So yeah, we'd be open to doing all of that because I think Blackboard is the worst. Blackboard's
terrible and they have no incentive to change.
None.
And you can give them that incentive.
Well, they will, right? Because we are going to procure for a new LMA system next year, right? So, I mean, it might be an opportunity to do something jointly with SUNY, but so again, for us, that's one element which is very, very important, and we're going to do things always by the book, going through the procurement process. But I think Blackboard has gotten the message, right, in terms of not feeling that they were the only game in town. We do have also, we have one full-time person in the office of the chief information officers whose entire job is just to be looking at how our different technology platforms, service individual with disability and all those areas too. So we try to be as sensitive as feedback that we get from students and faculty, new products in the market. I believe that it was in our license with Zoom that some of the early experimentation with captions was done, in part because of our size and our volume, to your point, as a new assignment. So happy to keep pushing the envelope, and it's something that the chancellor and I have spoken about, where are the chances where we both get the chance to procure the things that we need, but then have a lot more mojo by the strength of our size in dealing with some of these companies that in many places in higher ed, they're becoming, just 2-3 vendors, right? Which makes it very difficult for you to get them to be responsive at times.
Thank you. And I just want to quickly follow up on Judy Griffin earlier about marketing and publicizing. I represent Marymount Manhattan College, and who are the most, who do you consider the most famous person that's ever graduated from SUNY and CUNY? I know at Marymount it's Laverne Cox and Jerry Ferraro. So just quickly, who would you say is among the most top famous that you could use in your marketing?
Well, I'm not answering that question, or I'm going to get myself in trouble. We have a whole wall of very distinguished alums, which we will send you a video from astronauts to, Al Roker, to many members of the state legislature. But I'm afraid if I answer incorrectly, especially with the speaker graduating from Stony Brook, and I don't say the speaker, I feel like maybe CUNY will get more money than me. So I'm going to defer to my colleague.
And the speaker is a twofer, a graduate also of CUNY as well,
Yep.
Chancellor Rodriguez.
Well, we put a poster up that we sent to all of the distinguished members of the Assembly and the Senate who are alumni. So we with the ones who were alumni from CUNY. So that's our gallery of Hall of Fame. So stand by that poster.
All right, we will look for that poster. Diana Richardson, you're up. Medgar Evers College in your district, and I believe you're also a graduate of Medgar Evers.
Oh, well, thank you, Assemblywoman Seawright. Good morning to everyone on the line. I am on the Amtrak, so I pray that the service is holding up as it's my time to speak. Let me just say thank you for this conversation. I enjoyed it as I've been traveling down back to the city. Thank you so much to Chancellor for the
Diana, I think you're cutting out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, it's okay. Oh, you can hear me now. Okay.
Yes.
I'll try to be brief. I'm really just trying to say thank you to Chancellor Rodriguez for the attention that is being paid to Medgar Evers College in naming a new president. And I want us to be really committed to supporting her transition on every single level. And I've heard about the conversation around the Alumni Association and the importance of pulling back the alumni. And I just want to flag that we have to look at the Alumni Association of Medgar Evers College because it's been defunct for over a decade. Blackboard does stink. And so I'll just add my 2 cents to that as a user of that program. And I'll be short. I just want to say today's conversation, and I'll follow up in a more direct way when when time permits. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Diana, and safe travels back to your district, I assume.
Let me just say, can I just mention, I mean, clearly we're excited about Dr. Ramsey's new tenure at Medgar Evers as the new president. We actually have a special transition committee with support from the central office that your very own Glenda Gracious in the phone call is in the effort to make sure that the transition to the new president is totally smooth. I've given each of my new presidents an executive coach that can support them, something that I wish I had received when I was president, so they can, and in this case is somebody working to help that transition get going. And we're very proud of the announcement of the new facilities at Medgar that will once and for all get rid of the trailers and allow the Medgar Evers College Prep, which I know that you were very instrumental to expand, but then also get additional new instructional space for the students at Medgar. So looking forward to doing more.
Thank you, Chancellor. And so it looks like we are now out of time, but I want to thank both of our chancellors for joining us and taking Q&A this morning, as well as our chairwoman, Deborah Glick of Higher Education, the speakers staff who are on, Maria Volpe McDermott from Programming Council, and Hannah Gauthier, as well as my staff. And I want to announce for our April meeting, we will be hearing from the Interact, the world's largest intersex advocacy group. Intersex people are born with several variations of sex characteristics, including chromosomes, gonads, hormones, and genitals. And so we will have an expert speaker next month on that topic. I want to wish everyone a happy holiday. And for my colleagues, it looks like I'll be seeing you tomorrow afternoon. It's going to be a busy weekend. Again, we thank you for joining us today, and stay safe, everyone.